Zendikar Rising isn't supposed to come out until September, and yet we already have spoiler information? Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about a potential spoiler for Zendikar Rising, and let's be real. One of the funnest things about Magic the Gathering is the newness. I mean, we're always on this, like, we're running in our little hamster wheel towards the new cards constantly. That's what we want. I've noticed without fail, whenever we are like mid-spoiler season for a set, someone's always like, yo, you got some information about the next set? It's like, we're not even done here. So we're in a scenario where Jumpstart has been spoiled, but hasn't been released. What is it? Double Masters? Double Masters has been announced. A few cards have been spoiled. That hasn't been released. We haven't started the Double Masters spoiler season at all, which means we have another spoiler season before we even get to Zendikar Rising spoiler season. So to have this card leak out, because we have one card to talk about, a Nissa Planeswalker specifically. Now I do want to state that this information comes by way of Reddit groups, okay? Some groups have left the post up, some have deleted it. Now, in the recent past, we have seen multiple instances of Reddit posts accurately predicting the cards that we were going to see. There were some that felt a little bit weird, the Teferi, for example, that felt weird, but turned out to be pretty much bang on. Some of the stuff we heard wasn't accurate, but there's definitely enough for me to feel like this is worth, it's a situation where it's worth considering it as a possibility, but not automatically taking it concretely that this is actually genuinely guaranteed to be a card. I lean more towards this being a card than it not, but we still have enough doubt that I'm not willing to stamp the absolutely true down on this one. So, we're going to be dealing with the green-black Nissa this time. So let me tell you about the card, and then we'll talk about how actually in the past, Nissa has actually messed around with black magic. So, the potential Nissa is, there isn't a name for this, so it's just being called Golgari Nissa right now. And it is 2 colorless, a black and a green, so it's a 4 casting cost Planeswalker. It has +1, untap a land you control, or untap target land you control, whatever wording it is. This is done in a kind of laid-back fashion without absolutely accurate wording, which neither automatically disqualifies it, right, or qualifies it. Clearly, you're not going to look at like a casual way of saying thing, untap land you control versus untap target land you control, untap a land you control. There is a little bit to be desired in terms of the writing of this, but if somebody's just lazily going, yo, I know they're doing this card, here's what it is, that doesn't necessarily like exclude it automatically. So, +1, untap a land you control, it's a 3/3 elemental with haste and menace until end of turn, still a land. It's an interesting idea, actually. Like, when we break that down, the haste and menace thing kind of works pretty well together. In terms of, you put this out early and you only have 4 lands, turning one of your lands into a creature for a turn to swing with is kind of risky. They could play a creature destruction spell to take it out, or more easily, they could just block it with some creatures to destroy it. So by giving it Menace, you make it so that the +1 ability is a little more meaningful, because people like me, like if I played this Planeswalker, I would be very cautious about attacking with the lands. I wouldn't want to lose my early lands, so if they had sufficient blocking power, their own 3/3 or 4/4 or whatever it is, or a big fat Uro sitting on the board, you're not going to want to swing with your lands, right? But giving it Menace gives it more of an evasion. Yes, it's still blockable, but now they have to have 2 creatures out to block with it, which makes the ability more usable. So it's got a +1 to do that. It's got a -5 to put a creature with CMC, converted mana cost, equal or less than the number of lands you control from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters. And that's actually the ultimate ability. The other loyalty ability that this card has, and this is the weirdest part of it, is Landfall. where it's basically landfall, put a loyalty counter on Nissa. Now, this is an interesting alternate way to build loyalty on a Planeswalker. We've seen a number of different, like, somewhat divergences from how loyalty is accrued for Planeswalkers, but this would be the first time that it would be based on landfall, and it does actually give you the ability to accelerate it faster, right? Because the landfall is a trigger as opposed to a loyalty cost. So normally with Planeswalkers, you have abilities where you either, like, you pay the loyalty cost either by increasing the loyalty or decreasing the loyalty, and you can only activate one of those abilities a turn. But the landfall ability would fall outside of that spectrum and allow you to basically, just as many lands come out, you can build her up by that much. Now, by not having a super powerful ultimate, you know what I mean? Like, that's a good ultimate. If you exclude the landfall, then you have to play Nissa, and for the first turn, you have to beef her up, right? There's no getting around the fact that you have to crank her loyalty up on the first turn she comes out. Now, if you can +1 her and play a land on the same first turn, then on the second turn, you're going to be able to resurrect a creature or bring one from your hand directly into play. Now, I mean, depending on the creature that you have and the size of it, the beefiness, that could be kind of a problem. But there's no way to drop Nissa right away, aside from like a doubling season outside of standard or something like that. But there's no way to drop a Nissa into play and immediately be able to activate her ability. And so when you factor in the fact that it takes an extra turn, it does lend a little more like, okay, you know what, I could see them messing around with this ability. It certainly does feel powerful, right? I mean, for 4 mana in total, you're going to be able to possibly either resurrect or play multiple creatures out over time. Of course, that is under the golden dreams of, oh, my Planeswalker didn't get destroyed, which if it's a real threat in the game, the chances of it lasting like that, not so hot. But on the surface of it, there's nothing that I look at on the card where it automatically feels like it would be too powerful. Now, bear in mind, I am not a master of like the meta when it comes to hardcore formats. When we're talking modern, standard, things like that, I don't have like top tier, I'm going to write lists for you on the best cards from each format. That's not how I operate. I play like a 250 card mono green deck. So there are cards that can slip by my radar either being way more powerful than when I read them. What I'm trying to say is, when I saw Oko, I didn't think Oko was busted. It required me actually seeing Oko in action for it to be busted. So there may be some of you who are yelling at the screen right now going, what are you, an idiot? If they made this, it would be way too broken. I mean, I'm looking at it from the lens of standard. In older formats, sure, it may be more busted, but that's part of Wizards' goal right now, right? They're intentionally designing cards that are powerful enough to reach out beyond standard and shake up other formats and also make their way into like Commander and things like that. So, I mean, them making a card that's too powerful, especially when it comes to a Planeswalker, totally within the realm of believability. Honestly, for me, one of the biggest things that makes me wonder if it's real is the black-green aspect, because you may not know this, but Nissa was retconned. They didn't like Nissa's past. If you're familiar with the Gatewatch was Wizards' idea where they wanted to create their own, like, Marvel's Avengers. They can say whatever they want and go, oh, that's not what we were going for at all. But it really, really feels like that's exactly what they were going for. A group of heroes that you follow over and over and over and over and over, not realizing that we would find it incredibly tedious. And this actually led to them making changes for the Ixalan block and other stuff where we were supposed to see the entire Gatewatch, but they only gave us parts of the Gatewatch instead, because it gets incredibly dull when you follow the Gatewatch constantly, because the problem with the Gatewatch is there's 5 Planeswalkers. So the threat level, that like, you have 5 Planeswalkers. These are characters that, yes, they don't have the godlike powers of old Planeswalkers. However, they are still incredibly powerful beings, which means you need incredibly powerful threats for them to overcome. Multiverse threatening threats. But it gets boring to constantly follow them, where like everything is always the end of the world and it's always these 5 people who are going to stop it, or maybe we'll change one out. Regardless, what happened was they wanted like Nissa to be part of the Gatewatch. So they changed her character overall. The original concept for Nissa was that she was totally in love with elves in terms of elvish superiority. She was part of, like, on the world of Zendikar, the Jaraga elves specifically were, like, massive elitists, okay? And they believed that elves were better than all other life forms. And so Nissa was brought into this as well. And that was furthered, actually, when Nissa was on Lorwyn and saw that the elves there also engaged in this sort of superiority thing. So Wizards of the Coast really, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you look under it all, the sort of like elvish superiority, you know what I mean? Like elf power, you get the concepts like elf power, sort of like suppress all other non-elves, that sort of vibe. So Wizards of the Coast, and I will say this is unfortunate, Wizards of the Coast isn't willing to explore those concepts anymore and isn't willing to like mess around with that. They want to pretend like stuff like that doesn't exist anywhere in the multiverse, which overall diminishes the depth, because with the amount of different worlds and people that you're going to have scenarios where this exists. And instead of taking this as an opportunity to like show, hey, you know what, this is something that's wrong, this is something you can overcome and improve on, instead they just retconned basically Nissa and just changed it and said, nope, that's not her origin no more. That didn't happen. They instead of taking the better route and having her like grow and truly overcome that sort of like awful mentality, they just went, nope, that never happened. But during the time that was actually Nissa's history, when she was on the world of Lorwyn, the elves there were like so messed up that not only were green, they were green-black. They were corrupted and awful and evil. There was some of them that would just go out and hunt creatures that were uglier than them simply for being ugly. And all of this, like Nissa coming from a group of elves that believed in elven superiority, and then meeting up with the elves on Lorwyn, which also believed in elven superiority, well, that led her to secretly dabble in black magic. So Nissa technically has a history of messing around with black magic. Now, again, this was many, many years ago. So I don't know if Wizards of the Coast is just going to go, you know what, we retconned that forever ago. Most people aren't going to know about it. Fine, let's take Nissa into the green-black territory. And for me, I find the idea of planeswalkers that are shifted out, like, if you have a monocolored planeswalker and you align them with an enemy color, I find there's an interesting opportunity for storytelling there, like we saw with Garruk. It's unfortunate that the outcry that happened did and kind of ruined the Garruk storyline, because originally what was supposed to happen with Garruk was he was corrupted by Liliana and her dark necromantic magic. And he was like a hardcore like nature shaman warrior kind of guy. But her corruptive magic made it so that any natural beings he tried to bond with would be corrupted and destroyed by it. And the whole corruption of his body, the complete changing of what he was, it drove Garruk mad and made for a really interesting storyline where Garruk was like hunting Liliana like a broken wild animal, you know, like this whole crazy awesome storyline. But unfortunately, that got thrown by the wayside because of a bunch of dumb, let's call it Twitter level nonsense, where people got all worked up about something that was completely unreasonable to get worked up about, that I'm not going to go into detail about here. But regardless, it led to the point where they basically shelved Garruk for a while and shelved the storyline. That's actually why in Throne of Eldraine, you'll see that Garruk in the storyline got the curse sucked out of him by falling into the Cauldron of Eternity, essentially. But in the artwork, it doesn't depict that at all, because Wizards had a completely different story for Garruk's redemption and being freed from the Black Mana curse aspect of the story. But whatever, I mean, that it is what it is. This stuff happens from time to time. So for me, this leads to the potential for an interesting character change as well, where going like green black, you know, like green is like life magic and black is like death magic. So those two are very, very much at odds. I feel like green's enemy colors are blue and black, but black feels like the more natural, like full-on, very primal life and death cycle, whereas blue is like, you know, more like thought versus primal, and then you've got like life versus death. So the green-black scenario is better to me. Either way, this is an interesting concept for a Planeswalker. I feel like there's a good potential for this to be real. I feel like I'm 60-40 right now. 60%, 55 to 60% real, like 40 to 45% fake. That's where I'm coming in at now. There's not enough for me to feel confident saying that it's fake, but there also isn't enough for me to be like, this is absolutely real. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below, or tell me about your day or whatever you want. It's the comment section. Use it as you see fit. What do I care? If you like my channel and want to help me grow, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff is great for the algorithm. It loves it, makes YouTube think that I'm somehow an actual channel. And you know what, if you really love what I'm doing, I've got a Patreon. You can join up there and support my channel with the money that I use to keep myself fat and happy. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you all soon. Bye!